Hi everyone, it's Marisa from bumblebeeapothecary.com, and today I'm bringing you along while I'm making some new recipes that have been highly requested by you guys. So today in the kitchen, I'm going to go ahead and start something early in the afternoon that I'm going to want to have ready later for dinner. I'm going to be making a soup, and I'm going to want chicken meat stock or chicken broth for that. So this is one of our old laying hens that we recently processed, and I've just been using these up for broth. They're pretty tough to eat and there's not a lot of meat on them, and they do make really flavorful stock or broth. So I'm just going to start that just using the basic chicken meat stock recipe. So I have it in there. I oftentimes will just start them from frozen because that's just the way it is, and it works out fine. I just start the cook time from when it's come up to a boil. And then I always like to add onion, garlic, celery, carrots when I have them for flavor, some pepper, ground pepper, and then some mineral salt. And then if you didn't see it, we have one of those under-counter water filters now from Radiant Life. I talked about this in a recent video. We're doing this since we're having a really hard time finding Berkey filters to replace in our water filter. So I'm just doing this, and it actually is really convenient to be able to just go to the sink and fill with filtered water. So we have been liking it. I guess this is a little update too of how we've been liking it. The convenience is amazing, and I feel like the water tastes really, really good, and it's a really good high quality filter that takes out all the things that we want it to: pharmaceuticals, fluoride, chlorine, pesticides, all those things, all those contaminants that we want to make sure are not in our drinking water. And so we have been happy with it. So I like to get that water in there so that I can turn it on to high so it can start working on coming to a boil while I chop the vegetables. So I go ahead and just cut everything pretty big, since it's going to be, especially for these older, tougher laying hens, it's going to be a longer cook time. At least 3 hours is what I usually do for these. And so I'm just getting those ready, and then I'm just going to add all those things to the pot. And then the next thing that I'm going to be doing is putting a pumpkin into the oven to bake, because I want cooked pumpkin for one of the recipes that I'm going to be showing you guys. And to cook a whole pumpkin, my favorite way is just this really easy method of breaking off the stem. You can pierce the skin with a fork if you want to. I don't always do that, sometimes I do. And then I just stick it into the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 hour. Sometimes I'll do it a little bit more than 1 hour if it's a very big pumpkin, but I just keep an eye on it and make sure that it's nice and soft when the hour is up. And then once that cook time is up, I just take it out, put it on a plate, and then let it cool. While that pumpkin is baking, this is the afternoon when I have some time when my youngest is taking a nap and I can just work on some things. I'm going to be making a recipe that I'm pretty excited about. A lot of you have been requesting this and asking about it, and it's something that I so far have not put on my YouTube channel or blog yet, and this is beard balm. So my husband has been having a beard for a while now, a few years now it's been, and so I felt like this was a good opportunity to go ahead and try this out. So it's not something that he uses on a regular basis, but if it's like for a nicer time, Sunday, going somewhere, something like that, it is nice to have a styling product to just kind of condition and soften, and then also just kind of style so it will smooth the beard and just kind of help it stay in the shape that you want it to without being unruly. So it has been nice. And I'm just going to show you my recipes. So I have a double boiler here on the stove. So it's my pan with some water underneath, and then the upper part on top of the pan of water. And to the top of the double boiler, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of beeswax. And then I'm also adding 1 tablespoon of tallow. So this actually is tallow that's already made into tallow balm, and I do get asked about this quite a bit because it's a great question. It's a really good question that you need to know the answer to, and that is, in recipes, should I be using tallow balm or just tallow? And you can really, in my experience, you can do either. It just depends on what you have. So I have this really nice odorless tallow balm that I have from very purified tallow that doesn't have any beef smell, and I've made it into tallow balm already. And so I just keep that in mind, that it's going to be a little bit of a softer consistency since it is already into balm than if it were straight tallow. So with this recipe, this works really well. If you were going to use very hard straight tallow that was not made into balm, then what I would do is probably reduce the beeswax by just a little bit, like maybe half of a tablespoon or so. Or you could also increase the liquid oil by about half a tablespoon or so. So that's how you just kind of adjust for that. But I do 1 tablespoon of the tallow balm, and then either 2 tablespoons of jojoba oil, or I have this from Plant Therapy called Near Perfection Body Oil, and it's mostly jojoba oil, but it has a few other really skin-friendly, hair-friendly oils in it as well, and so I'm using that. So it can really be any skin-friendly liquid oil that you want, but jojoba oil is really nice because of the properties that it has for skin and hair, and a blend like this that's mostly jojoba oil with some other skin-benefiting ingredients, skin and hair benefiting ingredients, is also a really nice choice too. So I will have all of these ingredients that I'm using linked down below if you want to find them easily. And then also, as soon as I can, I will work to get this written recipe up on my website, bumblebeeapothecary.com, so that you guys can have the written recipe and printable recipe card and all of that. So once I have the beeswax and the tallow into the top of the double boiler, I'm actually going to wait, and I'm not going to add anything else yet. I'm going to bring that water in the double boiler up to a simmer and then let that beeswax and tallow balm melt. And then you can see how it's starting to melt here. I just keep an eye on it. The tallow balm is always the one to melt first, and the beeswax takes a little bit longer. I like using a little wooden skewer or chopstick for stirring my oils and butters as they're melting. And here you can see that the water is up to a simmer. There's some steam coming out, and everything is melted, so that beeswax and tallow is all completely melted. And at this point, I like to go ahead and take it off the heat, and then I add my liquid oil, so my 2 tablespoons of jojoba or this jojoba oil blend, and then 1 tablespoon of argan oil. And then at this point, I will also add my essential oils. So you can do a lot of different things here. I like to choose some that smell nice and then some that have benefits. For this batch, I ended up using 2 drops of copaiba and then 4 drops of frankincense. I thought I had some bergamot, but it ends up that my bottle was pretty much empty. I guess I got a drop or 2 out. So I was planning on 2 drops of bergamot, so close enough. And my copaiba bottle was very difficult to open. I had to go get pliers and open that. And then since it took a little while to get the copaiba bottle open, you can see that the beeswax started to solidify. Now I like to not heat the essential oils, which is why I have it off of the hot water, but I did end up sticking it back on just to warm it up just enough so that that beeswax would melt again, and then took it right back off as soon as it was completely liquid again. And then the other essential oil that I added was some sea salt and sandalwood, or vanilla and sandalwood. I'll have them linked down below from Plant Therapy. It's a nice blend. And then just stirred those essential oils in, and once everything was well combined, then I poured this into tins. In total, you can do 20 or more drops of whatever essential oils that you want to use is what I usually follow for this, but that's just an example. You can do so many different things, but those are the ones that I chose for this time. And then just pour the mixture into tins, and then it solidifies really quickly, so I just let them sit on the counter, and then pretty soon they were solid and ready to use. And then when the beard balm was finished, it was actually time to take the pumpkin out of the oven because its baking time was up. And so I just get a plate out, set that on the stove, take the pumpkin out with hot pads, and then I just set that pumpkin on the plate and I just let it cool until it is ready to take the skin off later. You just want to let it cool so that it can be easily handled. And then at this point, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the other recipe that I'm really excited to do, which is an updated recipe of flourless, or you could also call them GAPS diet, pumpkin muffins that I'm really excited about. So I have a very old pumpkin muffin recipe on my website and YouTube channel that I made way before I took my GAPS coach training and all of that. And it uses commercial coconut flour, which now we know that Dr. Natasha does not recommend commercial coconut flour on the GAPS diet because it's a very, very fibrous. It's a commercial byproduct of manufacturing certain coconut products, and it's just very, very fibrous and irritating to a gut that's leaky and needs to be soothed and healed and sealed and all of that. So we do not use coconut flour on the GAPS diet. You can use homemade coconut flour, and I do have a YouTube video on how to make homemade coconut flour. But this recipe just kind of comes at it from a whole other angle. I have some other cupcake and muffin recipes on my YouTube channel and website that are flourless, and they use coconut manna, and I love doing that because I love the texture that it makes, that they end up being. So that's what this is. So it's a flourless, it doesn't use any flours at all, pumpkin muffin recipe. And we were really happy with how this recipe turned out. I like it a lot better than the original one. It's really delicious. My kids devoured them. They loved them. So I'm just going to walk you through how I made this. So the first process is to get your pumpkin. So we baked that already. We let it cool so it can be handled, and then it's a little bit of a tedious process when it's time to take the skin off the pumpkin and take the seeds out and everything. It's not too bad. Once you get started, it actually gets easier. It's just in the beginning that's hard to kind of get it started, but I found that a bigger spoon, like a soup spoon, works to kind of start scraping it. And I'll just try to make like a hole in the top of the pumpkin, and then I can start taking some pieces and putting them into my blender because I use a blender to mix this together. And then I can scrape out seeds and further disassemble this and have usable pieces of pumpkin. So I want about 2 cups roughly of cooked pumpkin into the blender. So I'm just going to work on getting about that amount. And then now I have a ton of cooked pumpkin set aside for other recipes. So I'm just going to set that aside for now and work on it later. And then the next thing that I need to add is the coconut manna. Sometimes this is also called coconut butter, but all it is just blended coconut. And so it's nice and silky, doesn't have those problems that coconut flour, commercial coconut flour has. And it is a little bit harder to get out of the jar at first, so I like to let it warm and soften in a pan of hot water on the stove for a while. So I will loosen the lid so that I can check on it and stir it easily. And then I'll just set that in a pan of hot water on the stove and then, bring it up to a heat gently. And then as soon as it's soft enough to scrape out of the jar, then I'll add that to the blender too. While the coconut manna is softening, I'm going to go ahead and add my other ingredients. So I'm adding 1/2 cup of shredded coconut to my blender. Now I'm also adding date syrup. This is my favorite sweetener when it comes to GAPS diet or, flourless, refined sugar-free baking. And that is because honey, Dr. Natasha has talked about that when you heat raw honey, you destroy the enzymes and beneficial nutrients. So she says you can do it. It's not going to turn it into poison or toxic or anything like that. But it is better to avoid heating honey. And so in baking, she really does recommend something like dried fruit. So these can be either dried dates with the seeds taken out that you've let sit in hot water for a while, or date syrup is really easy. You can make date syrup yourself, or places like Azure Standard have date syrup available that you can buy that's just like you would make yourself. So for this recipe, you can do anywhere, depending on how sweet you want these, 4 to 8 dried dates, or you can do, I just eyeballed the date syrup, and you can see it was probably 1/2 cup, like a generous 1/2 cup or so, maybe a little bit more. I wanted these to be more of a dessert type of a thing. And then 10 eggs, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda. as well as 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And then for my seasonings, to make these like a pumpkin spice flavor, I'm doing 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, and then 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. At this point, the coconut manna is now soft enough to be able to easily scoop out of the jar. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out of the pan of hot water and add that to the blender as well. And then I'm just going to go ahead and blend this, so I like to use the batter setting on the blender and just do that a couple times until everything looks very smooth and well combined. And then I'm just going to pour this into the muffin cups, filling them about 3/4 of the way full.
No. We ripped down a couple of Mama. People can't come to the biggest hotel for
And then these are going into a 350 degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. And then I'm going to let those bake for 30 minutes.
Eggs go into the pumpkins. You got pumpkin and eggs. Great way to use both. Baby!
While those muffins are in the oven baking, I'm going to go ahead and get started on dinner. So I'm going to be making potato soup. We have the chicken broth or chicken stock, whatever you want to call it. Chicken meat stock is how I made it from earlier today. That's just about ready to use pretty soon. And then we have a lot of milk actually that needs to be used up. So I'm doing a cream soup type of a thing, a potato soup, just a nice basic potato soup. It's one of my kids' favorite soups. We all really like it. And so I'm starting off by putting some butter into my pot on the stove. And then I'm adding onion chopped nice and small, celery chopped nice and small, and then carrots. And then I'm just letting those kind of saute in the pot with the butter so that they can start to kind of soften a little bit. I always like doing that step because I feel like it adds to the soup's flavor when they're able to saute in fat for a little bit in the beginning. And then at this point, I just kind of keep them moving, stir them around a little bit. It's actually time to take those muffins out of the oven now. So here's how they ended up looking. They smell so good. We really, really like them. My kids love them, like I said. So it's a really nice recipe. I'm going to work on updating the written version of the pumpkin recipes on my website so that you guys can have this new updated pumpkin muffin recipe on there. And I'll work on that and get that up as soon as I can. Meanwhile, to finish dinner, I'm just adding some meat stock from that chicken stock that I had going earlier to my pot of vegetables. And I'm just going to let that cook for a little while so that those vegetables can finish softening. And then I'm adding the potatoes now at this point as well. So I have done it different ways, peeled and cut up whole potatoes, or as your standard has these frozen, already peeled and cut up organic potatoes that make it so easy to just be able to scoop these out of the box frozen and add them to pots of soup. And it makes it so easy. So it's really nice to have those on hand. And then I have some ham. This is all natural, uncured, additive free ham that you can get pieces of these at like a health food store. And so I'm just chopping that up nice and small. I like this soup because the meat stock is also another protein source. And then it has lots of butter in it too, so it ends up being pretty filling. And then now that the muffins are cooled a little bit so that you can handle them, here's what they ended up looking like. And with some nice butter on there melting. They were so good. I'm really can't wait for you guys to try these. And then so that I can have some updated pictures for these as well, because I want the pictures on the website to accurately reflect what this new updated recipe looks like, I'm setting up my little photo backdrop and I'm taking some photos of my things that I've made today. So I took pictures of the muffins and then also the beard balm so I can get a picture up for that on the recipe. Our cat is not supposed to be on the table and he knows that, but sometimes he does it anyway, and he knows I'm busy, and as soon as I walk over there I'm going to get him off because he's not supposed to be on there. And then back to dinner, I'm adding some more butter to that soup, and then I'm also doing the step where you add the milk, so you have a separate smaller pan on the stove, and then you add a little bit of arrowroot, which is optional, but I do like to add it just because it helps thicken everything. So I have some arrowroot, and then I add the milk to that pan, mix it really well so there's no lumps, and then I heat that up so that it starts to become thick. And once that's nice and thick, then I go ahead and pour that into the main pot there, and then also add some salt. I always like to taste this to make sure that I'm adding the right amount of salt, since I did already have salt in the chicken meat stock, as well as the ham will add a little bit of saltiness too. So usually add a small sprinkle of that depending on what it needs. And then I will usually add a little sprinkle of pepper as well. And then at that point, it is ready to serve and enjoy. And it's so good, a really nice cold weather meal. All right, I hope that you enjoyed coming along for this afternoon and evening in my kitchen while I created some things and made some things. I hope that you guys enjoyed those new recipes. I know that you've been waiting for them, so thank you for your patience. Thank you also for your ideas, recipe suggestions and ideas. I always love to hear from you guys about what you want to see and what you'd like me to make, so definitely keep those coming. And like I said, I'll get those written versions up on my website, the new beard balm recipe, and then also an updated version of that pumpkin muffin recipe. And I will link ingredients and things that you need, especially ones that might be a little bit harder to find or you have questions about, down in the description box. And then also check out that description box. I have links to ebooks that I've made down there that are for free. I also have my complete skincare recipe ebook that has all of my recipes that I have created all in one convenient ebook is down there. I also have meal plans, different things, so be sure and check those out. If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. Consider sharing it with anybody who you think might enjoy this video. And if you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I get out new videos every week on nourishing recipes and natural living. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.